In this No Rest for the Wicked video, I'm going to be talking about my hands-on impressions with the game, what I played so far, how the game plays, the game mechanics, basically anything you want to know about this game I'm going to be talking about in this video. And if you're not familiar with this game, this is the new action RPG being developed by Moon Studios, makers of Ori and the Blind Forest and Ori and Will of the Wisps. Those were 2D Metroidvania side-scroller type games that had vibrant, beautiful art, and No Rest for the Wicked has an amazing art style as well that I think caught players' eyes immediately when the announcement trailer happened. The first thing we're going to talk a bit about is character creation, and this is the first thing that you do in the game. You're going to make your character. There are a variety of options in terms of how you can make your character look. It is not the most extensive character creator I've ever seen, but it is nice that they have one. You won't see a ton of these details while you're playing throughout the game generally because of the view of it, but it is nice that you are allowed to kind of create the character that you wish. And it has kind of the, interesting art style that you would expect from this game, having seen the trailer. It's not like very realistic or anything like that. It has like its own defined art style. Now, the next thing is that you will create a realm and you will go into that realm and play in that realm. Now, I don't know everything about the realm. It seems like options were removed here, but I have a theory that in the full version of the game, because we're playing like a pre-release build of the game, I think in the full version, you'll be able to customize your realms in some way. I don't know if you'll be able to like add modifiers, change difficulties, or make custom settings for the game. But there's something to that that's kind of missing from this build. But you're going to create a realm, and then you're going to go into it, and you're going to play. So once you go into that realm and you start playing, from what I can tell so far, the world seems to be static in terms of the world design, meaning that like if you play the pre-release build and start to finish, and then you play it again, like everything is in the same place more or less in terms of the graphical layout. However, the loot is randomized. So what you get from each chest, from each enemy drop, etc. is varied, and you will not get the same loot on each playthrough. And loot has different qualities. You have common, which is white. You have rare, which is blue. You have cursed, which is purple. And you have unique, which is gold. Now, cursed items, the purple items, have powerful bonuses, but they also have a negative effect. And you have to decide whether those powerful bonuses are worth it, or, the negative effect is just too much for you. And then obviously you have the gold unique items, which are like the very powerful items in the game that have been handcrafted for this game specifically. I didn't find any of those in my playthrough, but that's just kind of the nature of those items. Now, the randomization of loot is kind of a mixed bag in my opinion. I think it's more of a positive than a negative for most players playing this game. However, I will say that in my second playthrough of the demo, I didn't get a weapon that I really wanted to use. There are different types of weapons in the game that have different moves. For instance, you can have like dual daggers, or you can have a sword, or you can have a single dagger, you can have a bow, you can have a staff, and their movesets are different. The way they operate is different. And if you don't get one that you want, then, at least a weapon type that you want, then you're kind of forced to use other weapons and stuff like that, and that can be kind of annoying. Admittedly, we're talking about like the first hour or two of the game, so I think eventually you'll get the weapons you want anyway. And obviously the game is going to be much longer than that. But if you're just talking about from a negative perspective, it can happen that you don't get a weapon type that you want, and you're, forced to play with whatever you find for the moment. However, what I really like about it is it forced me to play with weapons that I wouldn't normally play with, and I really enjoyed a lot of those weapons. So that kind of worked out. Now, No Rest for the Wicked has a huge focus on exploration, and it's not a massive map that we're talking about. There is a map. You can see where you are on the map, and things are marked on the map, which is quite nice. But the map is not huge, at least in the first area of the game. I'm thinking there are going to be multiple maps in this game. But it's like a lot is crammed into a small area of the game. So instead of something like, I don't know, Assassin's Creed, where like you have massive maps, but it feels like there's huge stretches of nothing in between. Like everything feels very condensed, and there's a lot of hidden stuff in a very small area, and it makes you want to really explore everything in the game. And as I was playing, I sort of got this Alice in Wonderland vibe from the art style and the way exploration was happening. And that's something I really love. I'm a huge fan of that kind of wondrous, magical world, and it feels like No Rest for the Wicked is very much in that same vein. And exploration was just a ton of fun. And obviously, as you're exploring, you're going to come across enemies, and then you're going to get into the combat of the game. And the combat kind of reminds me of Achilles Legends Untold. If you played that game last fall, has a similar style, right? Like it's kind of this isometric Souls-ish like combat. I don't know if it's quite Souls-like, but there are a lot of similar mechanics such as stamina management, blocking, parrying, charging up your attacks so then you can use your weapon skills, casting spells with the same resource. Like focus is basically your FP, and you use your weapon skills and your magic spells by gaining focus. Instead of using a flask like Elden Ring or something like that, you gain this by attacking, dodging, and parrying enemies. So like it kind of like builds up as you play. Then you can cast spells or use a weapon skill, and then you go back to doing these things and kind of repeat that process. But the combat as a whole kind of reminded me of Achilles Legends Untold, but done in a better way. Like this is probably the most polished isometric Souls-ish like, if that's a thing, that I've played so far. Another one that I played recently or somewhat recently was Alaloth, Champions of the Four Kingdoms. I feel like Achilles did a little bit better job than that game, and this game does a bit better job than that game, and I really like the direction they've gone with combat. It's not as engaging as like a Souls game in my opinion because you're not as immersed, you're not as close to the action, but it's still really, really fun. And something that sets it apart from like Souls-ish like games is that enemies don't respawn. So once you kill an enemy, they're effectively removed from the game world, and even if you like rest at like a checkpoint or you die, they don't respawn. So you have like this focus on, you know, clearing out the enemies. Like if you're surrounded by 3 enemies and one of them's weak and you're going to die, like it behooves you to actually like kill that enemy, make sure it's dead, so when you die and when you respawn, that enemy's dead and it's easier for you. And that might seem like, oh, well, that's a weird system. Then you could just kill an enemy, die, kill an enemy, die, kill an enemy, die, and make your way through the game. But there is a durability system in the game where your gear takes durability damage every time you die and such like that. So even though, you know, it is a bit easier than Souls games in that sense, you do get punished for dying. And I will say one of the things I really didn't like about Achilles Legends Untold was that the enemies kept respawning, and I felt like I wasn't really making progress in the game because they kept respawning. I just felt like I kept fighting the same enemies over and over, and I wasn't really making progress, and it got really grindy. So I eventually just stopped playing the game because it wasn't interesting, and I actually kind of appreciate that they've gone a different direction here, and the game isn't so hardcore, but it just feels more fun. So obviously, as you go through the game world, you're going to pick up loot from enemies, from chests, exploring, etc. You're going to get, you know, armor, you're going to get weapons, you're going to get trinkets or like rings, etc. that you can equip that have bonuses. And this is kind of how like your character customization starts to come together. It's going to be a combination of what attributes you select. There are attributes that are, you know, fairly familiar: strength, dexterity, intelligence, stuff like that. Maybe a couple new ones, but generally speaking, they're very familiar to you if you've played one of these types of games, and every time you level up, you get 3 attribute points that you can distribute how you want in them. And, you know, certain weapons have certain stat requirements, so you're not going to be able to use every weapon you pick up. That should sound familiar to you if you're familiar with the Souls games at all. So your build is going to start to take shape the more, you know, direction weapon type that you find. Like if you really like, you know, 2-handed swords or something like that, then you're probably going to be a strength-based character. If you really like bows or daggers, you're going to be a dexterity-based character. And as you go higher and higher in dexterity and you assign more points, it's going to kind of lock you out of, you know, weapons that are intelligence-based or strength-based, etc. So your build's going to be focused around the attributes, the weapons that you're using, and then the skills on those weapons, because each weapon type seems to have a different skill. I don't know if like later game weapons of the same type have different skills and how that's all going to work. That's kind of the progression of your character. And I sort of get the sense, again, this is a pre-release build, that maybe not all the mechanics of character customization are present in the game. Again, it's possible that there are more skills that you can get later, and, you know, we just don't have them in the pre-release build. So I'm thinking there's probably something like that, because customization right now feels a bit bare bones, and I'm expecting something else like a skill tree, or maybe, you know, the variety of weapons to increase with different skills on them that makes it more interesting. And another thing that the game has a focus on is crafting. You'll notice throughout the gameplay that you can mine stuff. You can harvest trees, you can go fishing, you can dig up stuff from the ground. And it seems like it takes a long time if you watch it in the game, and that's because you're going to get stronger and better tools, kind of like, I don't know, an MMO or something like that, as you progress into the game. So you start off with these like copper tools that go very slowly, and then as you get silver and gold, etc., they get faster and faster, and you can harvest, you know, more different types of stuff, and it'll go faster when you do it. And you're going to craft not only like equipment and like bonuses onto equipment and upgrade your equipment, but you're also going to craft your food, which then you eat to like heal or gain other bonuses. And the recipes that you can make depend on what recipes you found and learned in the game. You don't have like a healing flask or something that replenishes when you die. So like if you use all your heals on a boss and then die, you got to go craft more, kind of like, you know, Bloodborne or something like that, where like you just don't always have a default amount of heals every time you spawn. So finding, you know, other recipes that you can make food out of different items is very important in the game, and being on the lookout for resources that you can craft healing items with is going to help get you through the game. And a couple other things before I wrap up this video. Firstly, there are quests in the game, like there are NPCs you can talk to, and they will give you a quest objective that you can then do. It doesn't seem like there's dialogue options, like you know, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. It just seems like a regular, here's a quest, go do it or don't type situation. I don't think it's like, you know, that kind of RPG where there's a lot of choices. There's also a main city of the game called Sacrament that is where the demo ends, right? When you're going to go into the city, it ends. So I don't know what it looks like and what's in there, but it's supposedly like the main hub of the game. I'm guessing that like that's the area you're going to come back to in between exploring the game world, but I don't have a lot of specifics on that currently. The other thing I want to mention is that in terms of difficulty, I did die quite a bit during the demo. It is not easy by any means, and I've played a lot of action role-playing games, so you will die, mostly learning the mechanics of the game. As soon as you kind of get the hang of it and figure out what works for you and what your style play is, definitely gets easier, and that's really nice. I did beat the final boss of the demo, which is like the first boss of the game, I'm assuming, in my first try. So it wasn't super difficult by that time. The level did a very good job of setting me up, teaching me the basics, and then when I got there, I was fine. So in terms of difficulty, I don't think it's going to be as hard as the Souls games or Elden Ring, but it's definitely not going to be a pushover either. Additionally, I really enjoyed the voice acting of the game. I think they did an outstanding job. It adds a lot to the game, and even though the game, in my opinion, isn't like heavily story-driven compared to a lot of RPGs, even though there is what seems to be a decent storytelling to it, at least from what I can see so far, the voice acting is top-notch. You're going to notice this right away. And then the last thing I noticed was that there was no real background music when I was out exploring. I felt like it was missing. I was waiting to like hear some just subtle background music that kind of immerses you more into the game world, and it was missing for me. It's something I kind of expect them to add at the full launch of the game, or hope they do at least. But you know, when you're like out exploring the game world in like Elden Ring and you kind of hear that somber melody in the background, etc., it would just even occasionally, it would be nice to hear something like that in this game. So that kind of wraps up what I think about the game so far. So far, I'm really enjoying the game. The more I play, the more I really enjoy it. And I'm really sad that, you know, when I got to the end of the demo, I wanted to keep going. So that's a really good sign. As far as isometric kind of action RPGs, like Souls-ish likes games, this is by far the best one I've played yet from what I've seen so far. And I'm just expecting it to get better and better. So definitely keep an eye out on this one. So what do you guys think? Did you guys watch the presentation today by No Rest from the Wicked and see things on that stream that were not here? Do you have other questions about the game? Do you like the art style of the game? Love the art style. What do you make of it so far? Is this one you're keeping an eye out on? Let me know in the comments below.